Welcome to the March meeting of 2025, or I should say the Agenda Briefing Forum, opened at 6:30 p.m, and I welcome all of those in attendance. Councillor Wheatland is a late arrival, and we have an apology from Councillor Woodall. So I draw your attention to all right. Since we don't have Councillor Wheatland here to read Acknowledgement to Country, I will read that. The City of Melville acknowledges the Bibbulmun people as the traditional owners of the land on which the city stands today and pays its respects to the Whadjuk people and elders both past and present. So now I draw your attention to the disclaimer on the screen. The affirmation of civic, I'll go a little slower so you can read it. The affirmation of civic duty and responsibility on the screen. The advice of audiovisual live streaming and recording on the screen. The purpose of the Agenda Briefing Forum on the screen. So before we get to the business of the meeting, I would like to welcome the community to the public gallery. And tonight we'll be discussing the motions raised at our annual general meeting of electors. And I acknowledge that the LPS 6 review is a matter that many of you have an interest in. Now, the City is committed to listening to the community, and I ask you to assist with our decision-making process through mutual respect by not interrupting the meeting. This will assist elected members in hearing all discussions, questions and responses so they can deliberate in preparation for the decision-making next week. Now, if you wish to engage with the City on any matter, please contact the City or your elected members. And if you're planning on asking a question during public question time and you haven't already submitted those questions to us in writing, it would be appreciated if you could complete the question time form found on the table to your left and hand it to an officer prior to the commencement of public question time. Now, we have the following councillors attending electronically with my permission. Can you please confirm your attendance? Councillor Fitzgerald.
I'm present, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Spanbrook.
Present, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Edinger.
Present, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Declarations by members. We now move on to declarations by members. Are there any declarations by members who have not read and given due consideration to all matters contained in the business papers presented before the meeting? Okay, declarations by members who have received and not read the elected members' bulletin. All right, moving on to item 4, announcements by the presiding member. Approved deputations and written submissions. We have one deputation that's been approved for tonight's meeting in relation to item C25249, motions carried at the annual general meeting of electors held 3 February 2025 from Mr S. French of Ardros. I will call you forward prior to the discussion of this item to make your deputation to council. There are no written submissions approved for this evening. So, disclosure of interest. Can the Head of Governance please advise if there are any disclosures of interest for this evening? Ms Newman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, no disclosures have been received for tonight's meeting. Thank you.
And are there any further disclosures from elected members? All right, we move on to item 6, public question time. I advise 15 minutes is allocated for public question time. Questions will be dealt with in the order they're received, with those received in writing prior to the meeting addressed first. As per our local law, each questioner will have 2 minutes to ask their question. Please be respectful and do not use offensive or derogatory language or make false or misleading statements while speaking. So I now open public question time at 6:36. We have received some questions from Mr. French. Could you please come forward and ask those questions?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, CEO Bowman, elected members, council officers, and you in the gallery. Thank you very much for taking my question. I have a question related to the LPS 6 review, and it is to some extent related to the agenda motion that are put forward at the electors' meeting. We raised some concerns about the LPS 6 process and some steps in the process we don't think went as well as they could, and some concerns that we raised about what the city had proposed and why it had actually proposed it. In that motion, amongst the items listed was actually a specific item concerning insufficient explanation given concerning the cities and officers' investigations that took place that led to the LPS 6 proposals that were put out. And the question that I have relates specifically to that matter. I did submit it a week ago, but I understand it went missing in the ether a bit, and so that I won't get an answer tonight. But I understand that you'll take this question on notice. So if you're okay with that, I'll proceed with the question.
Yes, please.
Okay. Due to apparent conflict and contradiction in the city's LPS 6 proposals, please can the city explain what investigations or modelling did you do to arrive at the LPS 6 proposals presented to us? In particular, what specific investigations and models did you investigate? 2, what information or capacity considerations or other criteria did you use? 3, what areas did you look at? Was it the whole of the city of Melville, or did you exclude any areas from consideration from density increases? 4, if areas were excluded, which areas were those and why? And 5, how were Bull Creek and Murdoch stations and surrounding lands specifically considered? What investigations and modelling did you do for those? Were they included from the outset? And if they were excluded, when were they excluded and why? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. French. I'll just call on the Head of Governance, Ms. Newman, to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, thank you for your questions, Mr. French, and I do apologise for the error in the responses being prepared for tonight. We will endeavour to get those responses to you as quickly as possible, and we will take those questions on notice. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are there any further questions from the gallery? If there are no further questions, I now declare public question time over at 6:39 p.m. Thank you. Item 7, awards and presentations. This will be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of our council. Item 8, applications for new leave of absence. This item will be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of council. Number 9, confirmation of minutes. This item will be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of council. 10, new business of an urgent nature. There is no new business of an urgent nature. 11, identification of matters for which meeting may be closed. Item CD 2541, assess the impacts of prohibiting alcohol and unhealthy food advertising on bus shelters within the city of Melville, has been identified as containing a confidential attachment. Should elected members wish to discuss this attachment, the item will be held until the end of the meeting so the council can move a motion to go behind closed doors. Item 12, petitions. 2 petitions were received by the City of Melville on Tuesday, 4th of March. Both were submitted by Mr. Beard of Applecross. The first petition relates to a request to decline a development application for short-term accommodation and is signed by 20 electors. The second is in relation to a request for an off-lead exercise classification for Tompkins Park Canning Highway fenced playing fields. This petition is signed by 104 electors of the city. Both petitions will be considered at the ordinary meeting of council next week. Item 13, adoption of recommendations en bloc. This will be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of council next week. 14, reports. We're now moving on to the items for this evening. I would like to bring forward the following item for the convenience of those providing a deputation.
Madam Mayor, sorry, excuse me, Madam Mayor.
Yes,
Can we not
Councillor
ask
Edinger.
Can we ask questions about the en bloc items individually?
I'll just ask the Head of Governance, Ms Newman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. So the en bloc items are still part of this agenda. It's just they'll be dealt with en bloc at the ordinary meeting of council next week. So those items are still individually available for you to ask questions on.
So she can ask
Okay,
questions
thank
on
you.
them tonight. Yes, so you can ask questions on them tonight if you so wish.
Thank you.
We're bringing forward the following item for the convenience of those providing a deputation, and that is C25-249, motions carried at the annual general meeting of electors held 3 February. Prior to discussion of this item, I'd like to invite Mr French to come forward to make his deputation. Please make your way forward to the microphone. You have 10 minutes to present, with a further 5 minutes for elected members to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, CEO Bowman, elected members and council officers, and you in the gallery again. Okay, my presentation is concerning the AGM motions that you're going to be voting on next week, why they're important to us and why I really want you to vote for them. So next slide, please. So what there is a slide which is just a summary of one of yours, actually, that shows that we are in the preliminary phase of the LPS 6 review, and that as part of this, that you've sought feedback from the community so you can work out where to deploy your resources, make sure things are appropriately considered, and that you've responded to the issues which are identified. And I would very much like to make sure that you understand we are grateful to the city for undertaking early engagement concerning the LPS 6 review, and we thank you for doing so. Next slide, please. What I want to do is give you an example of where some of my concerns come from in relation to the LPX 6 review. And my example is relating to Wireless Hill East. That area is displayed for you on the slides, and you can see it to the west of a great big red block, which is where the Ardross Senior High School is. And we're all stood in the office right down at the bottom of where that picture is at the moment. So we note in particular that you chose this area, according to your information, because both Westfield Borogoon and Risley Centre are important activity centres within walking distance, close to Uppercross Senior High School, and they're close to Risley Street and Canning Highway. However, next slide, please. My concern is that it's not just a high school that's present within this residential area. There's a primary school right next to it as well. You haven't got another one of those in Melville, so this is unusual. It's also entirely contained within the residential area. It doesn't front onto a big road with high capacity. There is more porosity from the east, from Risley Street as you go in, and I've drawn some big arrows that shows where all the traffic goes and the means by which people actually get to that school for drop-offs and pickups and visiting the school. The fatter the arrow, the more traffic there is. Not surprisingly, there's more of this to the east of the school than the west. But you may be interested to learn, if you don't already know, that actually the entirety of that area receives traffic from people trying to make their way to the school in the most efficient way that they can. So the high school and the primary school are present, not just a high school. They're within the residential area in its entirety. It already generates a lot of traffic, and it's increasing. Next slide, please. Here's some pictures. Does this look like a normal residential street in Melville to you? The answer to that should be no, it does not. Now, obviously, we see traffic situations like this elsewhere where there are schools, but what we have is a concentrated factor of a primary school and a high school right next to each other, and on a street that's been modified already to become a safe, active street. It is a very busy area for a lot of the time. You can see there's a white car in the background on the wrong side of the road as it overtakes other cars. Next slide, please. There's another one with a ute on the right-hand side, overtaking other cars with a car facing it in the other direction. We get some interesting behaviours outside this school all the time. Next slide, please. There's the Grimsey Road. Can you see that there are 3 lanes of traffic all facing the same way? This is the kind of dynamic equilibrium situation we face in our suburb that is dynamic in the same way as climate change is. It's a system that's under stress, and small factors can actually change it and push it over the edge. All the parents have got together and organised themselves to fill up all the parking spaces, then queue in the road, then overtake on the wrong side of the road to actually come around the traffic. This is a busy area with a lot going on in it. Next slide, please. Here's just a selection of other instances of traffic where we have traffic filling all the parking spaces and then parking on the other side of the road, on the curb, off the curb, on your landscaping, in the grassed area where they're not supposed to park by Links Road. And just on the bottom, just for the heck of it, there's Grimsey Road on a Saturday. They have a very popular Mandarin class there, and we get lots of people actually coming to the school area on a Saturday as well. They fill up the spaces quite effectively, and they can be there for an hour with the air conditioning running. And then just also for interest on Leverburg Street, P-platers. It's quite a thing for P-platers when they pass their tests as a show of status to turn up at the school in their cars, whether they need to or not. And they fill up the entirety of Leverburg Street and a lot of other streets as well and leave their cars all day long. Next slide, please. It's got to the point where the city, outlined in red there, put staff out on the main road. They have no powers to interfere with the traffic, but they're out there trying to stop kids getting run over every day. This is quite an interesting situation and very busy. Next slide, please. This one's particularly interesting because this is Alexander Road. That's right in the middle of where the school is, and all the area down that street is proposed to be rezoned R40. It is full of cars parked on the side of the road waiting to pick up kids because they will not park anywhere else, such that only one car can go along there. The car in the front on the right has a person in it on their phone. They've stuck their sunshade up on the window to stop the sun coming in whilst they wait there for up to half an hour or more for cars to come through. This is a busy area. It is under stress. Next slide, please. And I said traffic was increasing. Yes, it is. Those are figures for the school that show 7% increase in school pupils at the primary school and 15% at the high school. This is without any addition from LPS 6 in the school areas. And on the bottom, you can see pictures there of the increasing march of demountables all the way across the oval at the high school and even occupying bin storage areas around the side of the school. That school is full to bursting point. Next slide, please. Let's look at the intake zone. That's the boundary in light blue there for the primary school. 18% of all your APL 6 proposal area is within the primary school boundary. But it gets better than that. Next slide, please. There's the boundary for the senior high school. 61% of your LPS 6 area is within that. So the point I want to make to you here is we have a suburb that is already under stress, and that's without LPS 6. And basically, any increase anywhere in that catchment area means we are going to feel the benefit or the distress from that extra traffic in our suburb, which you are also proposing to increase densities. I'm really not sure that this is a good idea. Next slide, please. Another example, Wireless Hill East. Even before LPS 6 came along, we were having issues with development in the frame precinct that occupies the southern edge of that photo. Where the little explosion is, and the little arrow is where DAP 2024-13 sits, which is a development in a 4-storey precinct that is actually going to be 7 stories as proposed. It has a traffic impact statement which is almost fundamentally flawed. It proposes to dump all its traffic not onto Almondbury, where it's situated, but onto Bragall Place, straight into the mouth of all the traffic which is already coming into that area. The traffic impact statement says that there is adequate on-street parking. Megan, press the button, please. That's the street that, of course, is absolutely full of P-platers. So that's not true. Next, press the button again, please. There's also, I don't know whether you notice, massive signs on the entrances to Westfield Borough Green that say conditions of entry. They're about the same size as I am. The second item on that list says usage restrictions. This car park may only be used by persons who work in, visit or use this centre. Yet we have traffic statements, and this is one of 2, because there's another one, that says that public parking is available at Westfield. We are on the receipt of problematic planning applications which contain fundamental errors from consultants who have not done their homework properly. This is without LPS 6, so we are already under pressure. Example, move on please, next slide. Wireless Hill East. How many dwellings will you actually get? The thing is we've actually got lots of development already occurring at R20. People are spending a lot of money building houses. A lot of the suburb is built out. Are they going to be demolished anytime soon? No, they're not. Is there enough capacity, should you rezone, to cause us trouble, given the sensitivity of our area? Yes, there is. But will you meet your targets? I don't think you will, because the development that you want isn't going to happen. I'm afraid, I think we've left it too late. We're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Let's move on to the next slide. Westfield redevelopment. We talked about this at the workshop that we had recently for Westfield. It's all about the numbers for Westfield. 750 million they're going to spend on that, but it's delayed 4 years because of cost increases and supply chain issues. The Melville City Structure Plan that has already been done in 2015 has an expenditure profile, how many dollars are spent, how many more dollars can you get. They need an attractive centre and they need more residents. That gives them the dollars. They did socio and economic modelling for that. They said Canning Bridge is going to be growth. Residential to the north of the Westfield Borough Green, only limited and slow growth. Murdoch, they said, was the biggest growth area. That's where Westfield says the money is. If you want them to invest 750 million, you need to change our LPS 6 proposals. Next slide, please. Just for fun, Canning Bridge, this is what my journey to work is like. That's 8:30 in the morning at the Risley corner, standing traffic all the way down it, buses not moving. So the transport corridor is not as effective as you think it is. Next slide, please. So early community input, lots of feedback, objections, emails, letters, calls, ongoing. Why? Because our suburb, Wireless Hill East, is already doing heavy lifting for a number of other suburbs. There's already lots of change. This isn't a not in my backyard situation. This is an I've already got an awful lot going on in my backyard situation. And that's what I want you to understand when you're considering voting on these things. We have significant community concern, worry and frustration. 985 signatures in petitions already. You would have had more if you'd had a digital petition system. Hint, that's something you should do. Trust in the city is therefore somewhat eroded because we're not sure that you really understand the key issues of critical importance in our community. Do you really understand? I don't know. What's in the report of findings? I don't know. And that leads me to the latest problem. Next slide, please. So this is your consultation process that you amended and put out on the 23rd. I'm certainly not saying that you guys are doing it, but we are definitely want to make sure
Mr. French, can you actually wrap up your debate, please? You've gone well over 10 minutes.
I have, yeah. So this is the process that you're going through, but the community isn't in it. Next slide, please. There are many things there that say you want to put us in the centre of what you're doing, and that at very least, engagement seeks to achieve consensus on what is and isn't agreed, or at best, make us equal partners in the process. What I want you to do is to make us equal partners in the process. Next slide. Our motions relate to putting the community in and actually seeing what's in your report of review. We want to see it, and we think you should change your process to allow that. Final slide. This is what I think your process should look like. As well as the elected members seeing the presentation, we should be allowed to review it and comment upon it as well. Not it just go to you to voting for the elected members. That's it. Sorry I went over. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. I'd like to just mention that Councillor Wheatland is an apology now. She's unable to attend the meeting. Now it's time for question time from councillors. Please keep your questions. Yes, thank you. Please keep your questions short, and if you would also, Mr. French, just try and wrap your answers up in 2 minutes, within 2 minutes, please. Okay, so we have two online who wish to ask questions. We'll start with Councillor Edinger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. French, for your excellent presentation. Are you saying you have not seen the report or review dated December 2021?
No, I've seen the report dated December 2021. What I'm talking about is the one that you've got going at the moment, which doesn't have any further community engagement in it. So it's the one that you're writing as a result of the LPS 6 review.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well done. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks very much, and thank you again to the presenter. I've just got two questions. The first is about the development application that you referred to, DAP 2024-13. I appreciate that you have some challenges with the information that came in on that, and I agree. I think there were significant difficulties with that application as it was presented. But I guess what's happened with that application is that because we had those difficulties, we've requested further information before it progresses, and it's therefore lapsed. It kind of, nothing more has been given to us. So I wonder, I mean, in a sense, isn't that the system working well? The city's identifying that we've got deficient applications coming in, we're asking for more and better information, and when developers can't present that, it means that the applications really aren't going anywhere.
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, and I agree with you. The issue with that is that we don't actually know what the outcome is yet. You flagged a load of issues. I don't know specifically what issues you have raised, and we don't know what's happening with it. But we have a base level of confidence that is extremely low in the quality of planning applications which are coming through. So this is irrespective of LPS 6. And we think that with that pattern's been repeated once more since. I don't know how many times it is going to be repeated in the frame precinct. And we're actually quite concerned about the impacts with that. And we're not sure how well you will actually add those into your consideration of LPS 6. But certainly what we've seen in terms of planning applications already, irrespective of LPS 6, are a cause for quite significant concern. But I agree that the process is happening, but I don't know what the outcome of that is and how far you guys are going to get.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And just a quick follow-up question. I appreciate much of what you've said, particularly about community having more and better access to the information underlying assessments that have been made. I wonder, though, if you've identified anywhere in the area that is of your concern where you think, okay, these upcodings perhaps aren't a good idea, but other upcodings might go ahead. And I ask that because when you undertake kind of a suburb by suburb comparison, it's likely, and hopefully the information will filter out a bit better, that you'll find that there are already suburbs such as Willagee, which have had very substantial upcoding to R40 almost right across the board. Now, it may be that for various reasons, particularly legacy traffic reasons, that's not appropriate in all areas. But I think it's equally the case that I think you said this is not in my backyard issue. It's a, my backyard already has significant issues, and I accept that. That seems fair. But equally, there are already other parts of the city that are being asked to do the heavy lifting. Canning Bridge, I think, uniquely so, but not just them, a few others. So when it comes to spreading the load of housing, and that's part of what LPS 6 is trying to do, is there any, I guess my question is there any part of the proposed area that's of your interest where you think that this might work and others that it might not?
There's probably only a few locations for a few houses really in Wireless Hill East because of the unique circumstances we've got and the very high sensitivity of the area due to traffic. The problem is that you haven't considered the unique traffic generator that is within this suburb specifically, which is different to almost every other circumstance in Melville. And because of the high sensitivity, you can't afford to upcode this area because all you're going to do is add factors which are going to push that system over the edge and not actually deliver the benefit that you need. So I'm not saying that there aren't maybe one or two streets or somewhere that you could do it, but it'd be on such a piecemeal basis. And with housing stock that's already pretty recent and developed, you ain't going to achieve anything. You shouldn't be doing it, not with the unique circumstances in that suburb.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. French, for all the numerous photos you took. I never hear one word saying about public transport to relieve the kids, the parents dropping off the kids and picking up the kids. I notice a lot of kids walking across to the bus station. I suppose that solved the problem. I'm talking about now, not future. So is there any consideration for the school using public transport to relieve? I know that it won't solve the problem, but I don't see any buses there at all.
No, it's an issue, and also you're dealing with human behaviour. There's a lot of people who drive there because they want to, not because they have to, because of convenience, and people take the most convenient means. There's a lot of people who commute through suburbs and they can commute through the back streets and get there, and it's more convenient for them to do so. So they're not using public transport. Like I said, there's even the situation where there's a prestige factor for all the P-platers to actually turn up and park their cars. Whether the school could do something like that by banning them from coming, then that will be something. But it doesn't stop all the people who access our suburb from various different areas, park their cars all over the streets, wait there for half an hour or more, waiting for kids to come through. It's a matter of convenience for those people, and I can't really control that. But what it does do is actually increases the risk of an accident occurring. And when you mention kids coming through the bus stop, the pedestrian crossing on Almondbury, kids pop out from Garden City almost at a moment's notice, and they've got headphones on, they're on scooters, using their phones, sometimes all three at the same time. And I'm just amazed we haven't had a serious accident already.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Do you have any questions? All right, thank you very much, Mr. French, for your presentation and answering questions for us.
Thank you.
We're now moving on to questions for the Director of Planning. Mr. Varillas, are there any questions? Not from the gallery. No, you can't. It's too late. Question time is over. We're only having elected members are only asking questions from the Planning Officer. Are there any questions to the Planning Officer? Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank Mr. French for his presentation. It was excellent. And so my question to the Director of Planning is, it's not a predetermined outcome yet, is it? Is there, we've heard some excellent deputations over the last few months. Is the LPS6 proposed rezoning set in stone, or will there be opportunity for us to change, look at new scope in the months to come?
Mr. Varillas.
Through the Chair, thank you for your question, Councillor Barber. The City is at the early phases of the Local Planning Scheme 6 review process. What has been advertised is preliminary in nature, and they are ideas that we've sought input on from the community, and we thank the community for the effort that they've gone to in preparing their various deputations and submissions, and we will be taking them into account through the balance of the process. We will be engaging with Council on the various proposals and the feedback that's been received. We have to date, and we will continue to as the process progresses to a point where we'll formulate a draft statutory plan that will be presented formally to Council for adoption for the purposes of forwarding it to the West Australian Planning Commission and Minister for approval to formally advertise. So there are still decision-making points in the process for Council to determine what areas are in and out of the planning scheme review for the purposes of statutory advertising.
Councillor Barber.
So just to follow up with that, and based on Mr. French's comment, will there be any further community consultation?
Mr. Varillas.
Through the Chair, thank you for the follow-up question, Councillor Barber. There certainly will be, and the City will engage with Council on the scope of that community engagement to ensure that we have Council input on that and that there are opportunities for the community to put forward and have their say, and that will be considered by Council at a future point in time.
Thank you. We've got a few more questions. Councillor Barber, if we can leave you to the end. Councillor Edinger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can the Director please advise if the City looked at traffic counts when they were considering the rezoning options that are currently on the table, particularly those around Applecross High School and Ardross Primary School? Thank you.
Mr. Varillas.
Through the chair, I'll take that on notice.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you. And it's a question in relation to Brego Place, but I'll have a bit of a preamble here, if you don't mind. The city has a policy to keep traffic off the main roads, as in Canning Highway. With the proposals there, they want the traffic to divert back into the suburb. And as I understand it, in Brego Place, the developer wanted to exit onto Almondbury Road, but was directed to exit onto Brego Place. Is that correct?
Mr. Vrelis.
Through the chair, thank you for your question, Councillor Ross. We'll take that on notice and refer back to the internal notes that have come through from our traffic team to ensure that I give you the accurate information.
Thank you. Councillor Barber, did you have a further question?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just not sure whether this would be appropriate now. I think there's the annual general motion of the electors. Do we discuss that now, or is that a separate item tonight?
It is actually the subject of this item, all of the motions.
Okay, excellent. So there is an item coming up with the annual general electors' motions, and I think Councillor Ross has got an amendment to that or an alternate. I don't know whether you're going to speak to that tonight, but my question is to the Director of Planning. I think it was Mr. French who put the motion up, was to look at the Bull Creek and Murdoch train stations as part of the LPS 6 review, to try and take a bit of the heat off what appears to be a heavy load on the area that is of concern tonight. So do you think looking at the Bull Creek and Murdoch train stations is a good idea? Now, I do understand that it's not part of LPS 6, but the idea, and I think this comes with Councillor Ross's amendment or alternate motion, is that we look at that alongside. And I see this as a good idea, because we can start advocating the state government and getting them on board with preparing better crossovers.
Councillor Barber, is that a question or a debate?
Yeah, it is a question. So my question is, not Councillor, you've put me off now, Mayor. My question is, Director of Planning, is this a good idea to start looking at this alongside the LPS 6 review? What are your thoughts?
Mr. Vrelis, I'm not sure this is a place to get opinions from officers. They do provide researched opinions, which are in the report. But Mr. Vrelis, perhaps you'd like to say something?
Through the chair, thank you for your follow-up question, Councillor Barber. There is merit in investigating the train station precincts at Murdoch and Bull Creek. They are significant transport nodes with significant state government investment, and leveraging that by looking at density opportunities around those precincts is good planning. The resources and the timing of that is something that needs to be considered by council, and that's formed part of the response to the AGM motion, which is within the reporting. And we'll await council's determination as to how to proceed with that. But notwithstanding, they are appropriate transport nodes with significant investment that have opportunities for housing investigation areas within them, and there's processes that can facilitate that occurring.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any head of governance wishes to say something? Ms Newman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, just to clarify, we have received 2 alternative motions in relation to this item. One is from Councillor Green, which was received first, and one is from Councillor Ross, which was received second, and they are available for elected members on the portal. Thank you.
Will either of those members be speaking on them tonight?
No, they won't, because that will be the debate at the council meeting. Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So another question for the Director of Planning. So could you clarify whether the future committee consultation will focus solely on the changes leading up to the new plan, or would it be consultation of the entire plan again? Thank you.
Mr. Vrelis.
Through the chair, thank you for your question, Councillor Lim. It will be a consultation on the full plan that's endorsed by council for the purposes of advertising.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions on this particular item? Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll move on to the next one, which is item number M2547, Perth South West Metropolitan Alliance Memorandum of Understanding. Ms Bowman, Chief Executive Officer, is available for questions. Are there any questions? Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question about the charter. I note that there's a section that talks about the contribution that each of the member councils will make towards the alliance, and then also how that money is spent and the limits on how much is spent on different types of things that the alliance does. So I guess my question is, once we approve this charter, does that mean that for the next 6 years, the Melville Council has no ability to apply any discretion in terms of how that money is spent?
Ms Bowman, CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Robbins. So in relation to the spending of the actual funds, it is up to the board of the Perth South West Metro Alliance, and the council is also being requested to appoint the mayor and the CEO to that board. So there's representation on the board from the City of Melville in relation to decision making regarding the spending of those funds. However, but when you look at the 6-year period, there is an opportunity in the MOU for a council to provide a 12-month notice period to also terminate the MOU. So it isn't, in effect, that the council has to continue on with the arrangement for the 6-year period. There is an option if the council wish to end the MOU with the Perth South West Metro Alliance by giving a 12-month notice period. So each financial year, there is a contribution that council will consider as part of the budget process as well. So council would need to approve a budget for that particular financial year, and then it's the board of the Perth South West Metro Alliance that then determines how those funds will be spent.
My understanding is if the council was interested in certain issues being pursued by the alliance, that we would be in a position to bring that forward to a meeting and have that adopted. So it's not a case of they determine everything. No, we all input and put our priorities forward and move ahead with those priorities.
Could I just ask
Councillor
a follow-up
Robbins?
question? Thank
Yes.
you. So I'm assuming this MOU has been discussed and adopted, agreed by the board of the alliance. Is that correct?
Miss Bowman, CEO, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Robbins. Yes, that's correct. So the board has reviewed the MOU and the governance charter and is recommending that this obviously go to each of the member councils for consideration.
Okay, so if one member council was to propose a change to the MOU, what would be the process going forward? Would it then go back to the board of the alliance and then each member council would have, so the board would discuss and form a position on whether it supported that change or not, and then it would have to go back to each of the member councils? How would that process work?
Ms Bowman?
Thank you, Councillor Robbins. I'll probably need to take that question on notice to check the process. I believe that the MOU is going to be considered by the City of Coburn this evening at their ordinary meeting of council. So that's the current one that's been proposed. But again, there are possibilities where the MOU and the governance charter could be reviewed. So I'll check the exact wording about how to do that. Thank you.
Councillor Edinger?
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to the CEO. I'm just wondering if she can shed any light on how they actually set the contributions, because they're sort of a very precise number, which is in both cases like nearly $100,000. So why not make it $100,000 or $110,000. It's just these random figures. I'm just wondering how they came up with them. Thank you.
Ms Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Edinger. So the calculations, the formula is included in the Governance Charter and the MOU. I'm happy to go through that with you and get more detail, but it is primarily based on the population size of each of the member local government. That's the base contribution is allocated on the number of people who actually live within that particular local government area. So therefore it's scaled to the size of the local government, although there is a minimum contribution as well. But happy to go through that with you in more detail and answer that more fully.
Are there any further questions from elected members? Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll move on to item C25, 245, investment statements for January. Mr Tuffin is available for questions. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, we'll move on to the next item.
Apologies,
Oh,
Madam Mayor,
Councillor
Madam
Fitzgerald.
Chairman. Thank you. And oops, I pressed the wrong button there. Apologies. Through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr Tuffin. I just wonder if you could comment on the availability of AAA credit rating products and as a consequence, whether the 80% limit on the AA credit rating products still makes sense. Because I worry that the practical effect of an 80% limit on AA credit rating products when the market does not offer any AAA credit rating products is to push us, to require us to purchase lower rated products when that is probably not the intention of those limits.
Mr Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I probably have to take that one on notice. I think you raise a very relevant point that probably needs a little bit more consideration than trying to answer it here tonight.
No problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions on item C25 245? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Continuing from Councillor Fitzgerald, I've asked Mr. Tuffin before. We have got rid of the AAP shares, which is triple B, and I saw the Bank of Queensland, which is triple B, is still in our portfolio. I've asked you before, is there any intention to get rid of a lot of the Bs and double B investments, because the way the market is going is getting very volatile? Thank you.
Mr Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The current investment strategy is in accordance with Council's policy 009, and so generally the investment decisions are based on the credit rating through policies and standards, but also the best available return at the time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions on this item? If there's no further questions, moving on to the next one, C25 250, schedule of accounts paid for January. Any questions? Councillor Edinger.
Okay. Just give me a second. I've got to pull up my markings, my comments. Okay, my questions are for Mr. Tuffin. I'm wondering, or someone else maybe, I've got 3 items I have queries about. The supply of bin liners, we spent $84,348 on bin liners. I'm happy to take these questions on notice. I'm just wondering, how many bin liners does $84,348 buy? And should the city continue to supply bin liners, given the cost of the bin liners? And then my next question is about the payment made to the Dowsing Group, and it's $718,200.07. That 7 cents is always important to balance the books. I'm just wondering, it just says roads and paving supplies, work carried out around the city of Melville. Given the size of the payment, I personally would appreciate a bit more granularity. There's 2 different payments that were made, but if we could be provided with some more detail in relation to those particular payments, that would be very comforting. And my final one is we paid 66,000. I'm absolutely gobsmacked for the removal and disposal of play equipment from Hugh Corbett Park. Can someone please tell me, did they get a quote to get this done? Can I undertake this work? Just joking. I just think that that's a lot of money to remove, I don't know, a swing and a slide, and I don't know what was in the park. But if we could have a bit more clarity around what was removed, and if we go to the market to get quotes for removal of playground equipment, because as I said before, 66,000 to remove and dispose just seems an awful lot of money. I'd like to know in particular how many days and how many personnel Fall Park had on site, and what sort of equipment, just so we understand, you know, did they need 10 people for 5 days and a big excavator, or did they just have 2 men for 4 days and a dump truck? That would be great. Thank you.
Mr Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for those questions, Councillor Eninger. I'll have to take those on notice. I don't have those details available tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions on this particular item? Okay, moving on to the next one, C25-246, Statement of Financial Activity, January. Any questions? If there are no questions, we'll move on to the next item, C25-247, Common Seal, March. Any questions? If there's no questions, we'll move on to item C25-248, Melville Golf Centre Lease Extension Request, 21-year lease. Any questions? Thank you, Councillor Edinger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not sure who this is directed to, maybe the Director of Community Services, but I'm just wondering if the request that was made by the Golf Centre was made via an email or a letter or a presentation to the city, just a bit more clarity about how they made their approach. And also I would like some clarity about if the city actually takes the front foot when leases are coming up for renewal and approaches the organisations that have the leases and ask them if they want to, if there's like a process, a formal process that the city goes through to approach to see if people want to renew their leases. Thank you.
Mr Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to take that one on notice as well. I understand they approached us, but I'll just confirm that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've asked before, at the moment, the current operator is Belgravia. Are we open to other bidders, who may want to bid for the operations of the golf, and at least we have a comparison to see somebody who can do a better job? Thank you.
Ms Bowman, CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Lee. This is related to the Melville Golf Centre, which is in Leeming, and the Belgravia Leisure manages Point Walter, but I'm happy to talk to you about that separately. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, same question. Are they open to all? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We'll get back to you on the process that was followed. So there's a particular process we need to follow when a lease is coming to an end. So Mr Tuffin will go through how we manage that process when he takes, because he's taken that question on notice. We'll give you that detail. Thank you.
Are there any further questions on this item?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Spanbrook.
Thank you. With the request for the lease, this all started about 3 or 4 years ago, not quite 4 years ago, with regard to the John Connell Reserve Master Plan. the CEO would be aware of that. So, and there was going to be consideration at the time that they would be granted the lease. However, everything was put on pause. So as I have not received an update on this other than this just suddenly appearing, is there any further information that that the elected members can receive from the city, please, with regard to this? Because the John Connell Reserve Master Plan was going to impact it initially and then it was pulled back. So there seems to be still things up in the air a bit. So some more information would be very much appreciated.
Ms Bowman, CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Spanbrook. Yes, you're correct. It was put on hold while the John Connell Reserve Master Plan was being developed. With the draft plan that did go to elected members at an engagement session, we don't believe the Melville Golf Centre area will be impacted by any of the potential proposals at John Connell Reserve. So that's why we are now recommending that their request for an extension of their lease agreement be up to the 21-year period. So we are looking at trying to make their operations more secure. They have undertaken quite a lot of infrastructure investment in that site over the years, and they have been waiting until the master plan became more certain before we could actually look at recommending a longer term lease arrangement with that particular organisation. So we will come back to elected members with the John Connell Reserve Master Plan review, and one of the things we're waiting for was the clearing permit application with the state government before we could really come back to council with the master plan itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a follow up, please, Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Spanbrook.
So just thanks very much, CEO. So with that information, the city is then happy to grant them the 21 years because you are quite correct that they have actually invested quite a number of millions of dollars within that centre, and they do want some surety that they can continue, but they do wish to invest further funds into it. So if this, so right now this is completely separate to the application that's still sitting with DEWA.
Ms Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Spanbrook. Yes, that's correct. That the area where the Melville Golf Centre is, it's not impacted by the clearing permit application whatsoever. It's in a separate area where the cricket club are looking at an oval extension, so it doesn't impact the golf centre area. We are recommending a 10-year option for the Melville Golf Club to be able to then request a further extension of up to 11 years, so a total of 21 years for the Melville Golf Club. So it is a long-term lease, and that's why it is coming to council for consideration.
And that will put them in line with the other, apologies, Madam Mayor, we'll put them in line with the other sporting associations within the area there, Madam CEO.
Ms Bowman.
Thank you, Councillor Spanbrook. That's the maximum amount of time we have the power to lease for under the management licence. And yes, you're correct, it is the similar to the not-for-profit sporting clubs in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions on this item? All right, we're moving on to the next item. CD 2541, assess the impacts of prohibiting alcohol and unhealthy food advertising on bus shelters within the city. Ms Pickering has a presentation, a 5-minute presentation. Could you please come forward?
And good evening, councillors and the gallery. Just a quick run through in terms of the key components of the report on the impacts of prohibiting alcohol and unhealthy food advertising on bus shelters within the City of Melville. The item came about as a result of a notice of motion on the 15th of October 2024, and that was that the Council requests the CEO to prepare a report outlining the impacts of prohibiting alcohol and unhealthy food advertising on bus shelters within the City of Melville to be presented at an ordinary Council meeting by March 2025. Within the City of Melville, we have 58 bus shelters that have digital or static advertising, and the City currently has a contract in place with Media Street Furniture to supply, maintain and install the bus shelters, and that commenced on the 1st of November 2018 and ends on the 31st of October 2033, and there are 2 5-year extension options. The contract places no cost to the City to supply and maintain the shelters, which is estimated to cost approximately $3 million. And in addition, the City receives $140,000 per annum, which is used to improve disability access to the shelters. With respect to bus shelter advertising, the industry is self-regulated and there are controls in place near schools where alcohol and unhealthy food should not be advertised. And finally, the Cancer Council advocates to increase controls to reduce the prevalence of advertising alcohol and unhealthy foods on assets, whereby the state and local government authorities have a level of control. Next slide, thank you. So our review unearthed 4 local government authorities who have introduced policy restrictions regarding alcohol and unhealthy food advertising. And 2 of those local governments have introduced clauses in their renewed contracts with their either Media or the equivalent that operates in that area. The City officers feel that there are many positive impacts of introducing the intent of the notice of motion. However, as the City's legal advice has been sought and provided under a confidential cover, unfortunately, acting by trying to vary the lease or forcing a variation on the lease will place the City under financial and legal risk. So what the officers are instead proposing is that we write to Media requesting that they voluntarily restrict alcohol and unhealthy food advertising under the existing contract, that we also investigate the feasibility of a council policy that considers an advertising policy for restrictions on various council-owned property, that considers the legal advice that's been provided, that we continue to partner with our various agencies to support health promotion and utilise our free Media digital advertising on bus shelters to promote these campaigns, and finally, to not exercise the option period within the existing contract with a view to include new reasonable restrictions in any future contracts. So resulting from that, I have put the officer recommendations on the screen. I won't read them out. There's 6 of them. They're very wordy. They're also in your report, but happy to take any questions.
Before we take questions, I'd like to remind elected members that there is an item identified as containing confidential attachment. This item has a confidential attachment. So as long as your questions around the item itself and not the confidential attachment, we can have those questions now. If you wish to discuss the confidential attachment, we will leave this item till the end of the meeting and go behind closed doors. So do you have any questions? Councillor Hong.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. How many free time slots on 4 digital sites does Wu Media provide to the city?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Hong. I'll have to get that information for you and provide that before next week's meeting. Thank you.
You have a further question? Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can we use free advertising slots on 4 digital sites to promote the Healthy Melville plan? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we certainly can use that free advertising for that purpose. And that's a good idea.
Right, Councillor Edinger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to point out that the governance has helpfully provided 2 copies of the Cancer Council's audit report and no copies of the confidential legal correspondence in the confidential agenda. So, yeah, can't see it. Thank you.
We'll just check that for a moment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Edinger. We will check that and make sure that's corrected if that's the case. Thank you.
Councillor Spanbrook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have 2 questions. The first question is there any evidence that the advertising seen on the bus shelters of alcohol and unhealthy food, that there has been an increase in alcohol sales or perhaps Alcoholics Anonymous or any other body that obviously perhaps captures the information or data on the alcohol use within the city of Melville, as well as with regard to the unhealthy food factor, perhaps the increase in obesity rates or perhaps dental issues. And I know this is quite an extraordinary question, but there is a reason behind it. And the second question is, how does unhealthy food, how will that be defined? Which I know it's another hard question there, Director Pickering, but like how will that be defined? Like restricting alcohol, will that also include, those, I can't think of the name of those drinks right now, but they've got extreme levels of caffeine that I see lots of, high school kids drinking on their way to school. Red Bull, those types of drinks. Will that be included as well? Because this could be, where does it end? Thank you.
Ms Pickering.
Thank you for your questions, Councillor Spanbrook. The first question, we haven't come across any research that provides that direct link between specifically bus shelter advertising and increase in alcohol or unhealthy food intake. However, it is definitely a focus area for the Cancer Council. From that, I would say that they feel that there is very much a strong link, but certainly we haven't been able to find any empirical evidence or studies that demonstrate that. In terms of the second question, I do have a definition for unhealthy advertising, which has been provided by the Cancer Council and also is used by Wu Media and other advertising agencies as their definition as well. I will have to provide that. I haven't got it at my fingertips right now. I thought I did, but unfortunately I can't find it at the moment. Sorry.
Can I have a follow-up, Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Spanbrook.
Thank you, Director Pickering. With the officer recommendation, point 5, in respect to the future contracts and the city prohibiting, sorry about this, I'm just, it is point 5, that the CEO to include restrictions in future contracts for the installation of the bus shelters, etc. What is the alternative? Because the contract is 8 years away. So, lots of things change within 8 years. Is there a contingency plan if that were to take place. So in 2033, is there another organisation that the city have considered, perhaps they've considered them in the past, then to just to take that away could be could cause some issues. Thanks.
Ms Pickering.
Sorry, I think Mr McCarthy will take that question. Thank you. Madam
Mr McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for your question in relation to that matter. The confidential attachment has some legal information which addresses the aspect around the contract. In regards to when this contract is up for renewal, the city would decide whether it would exercise an extension or alternatively, if it felt that it wanted to change tack and put more stringent advertising constraints around the bus shelter arrangement, they could include that in a tender and put it out to the market to test the ability of other organisations who can come in and provide a similar service.
Thank you. Ms Newman, Head of Governance, would just like to clarify some things.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Ettinger, for bringing the attachments to our attention. There are 2 copies of the audit report attached. We will correct that in the elected members' copy. However, the legal advice is actually available separately on the elected members' portal if you wanted to access it.
Ms Pickering?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have found the definition for unhealthy foods. So the definition is products that are high in sugar, salt and or saturated fats with minimal nutritional value, and that's provided by the Cancer Council.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Green.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For Director Pickering, I was just wondering about this point 5, perhaps just the wording and thinking of maybe an amendment, but request the CEO to include restrictions. To me, the wording of that item in particular seems to be quite definite in terms of, putting the restrictions in rather than the other items saying investigate the feasibility of that sort of thing. Do you think a change of wording to consider restrictions or something like that could be feasible?
Ms Pickering.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your question, Councillor Green. Certainly, using the word consider, it enables the officers to use some discretion in 8 years' time, depending on the situation. I guess it's really up to council as to whether they want to take a strong stance and build something in for that future that is very certain, or if they're happy to for the officers to use some discretion when that future contract comes up. That would be the difference between those 2 words, I would say.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms Pickering, for your you worked together for a long time. But while we are doing all this, I've been driving around and I noticed that you only pick the 58 and the actual advertisers were very minor, I think were 5. Can we use as a bargaining power to ask all media whether they can use the rest, I think it was 200 over, as hey, you want to expand your business? We have more bus shelters for you. And can you put our overall plan to them? Because we keep talking about the 58, and then from my memory, there were only 5 of the bus shelters that were advertising the alcohol. So can we use that as a leverage to say, hang on, you look at all our bus shelters, because the other bus shelters are in very bad disrepair. you can tell that it's owned by the councils. You know, when you drive past, it's a broken down one, it's owned by us, and the nice ones are owned by the OMI. So can we use that and improve all the, because it looks really bad when we have, like Canning Highway, you have a lot of broken down, which is owned by us, and then you have the pretty ones by Old Media. Thank you.
Ms Pickering?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As this is a question around the contract and the bus shelters, I'll ask Mr McCarthy to answer that one. Thank you.
Mr McCarthy?
Thank you, Director. I think the program through the contract has got a series of upgrades that the company undertakes based on shelters that primarily meet the purpose of being on main roads where they get high exposure, and so they are reviewed by the city on an annual basis to look at the bus shelters that are upgraded as well as those that are upgraded to incorporate accessibility requirements. So the city does have the ability to be able to influence which bus shelters are targeted in terms of that upgrade. So Councillor Lee, I'd be happy to receive any suggestions from you about ones you think need upgrading, and we can incorporate that in communications back with the contractor.
Are there any further questions? I have a question. Now, we're talking about prohibiting alcohol and unhealthy food advertising, but a lot of the non-alcoholic drinks look a lot like the alcoholic drinks. So the beers are in a can, but they're a different colour, and the wines are in a wine bottle but have different labelling, and the gin and all those other imitations are actually not, as I understand, detrimental to health. They're non-alcoholic. Would they be able to be advertised? They're becoming more prominent now, so I'm asking the question.
Thank you for your question, Madam Mayor. So using the definition of the unhealthy foods, the unhealthy foods definition are products that are high in sugar, salt and or saturated fats with minimal nutritional value. So those zero alcohol drinks that you're referring to, if they were high in sugar, which I don't think they are because they're actually usually zero calories as well, but if they were high in salt and had minimum nutritional value, then they would certainly fall within the definition of unhealthy foods and would be considered for under that prohibition.
But if they didn't have those elements, they would be considered, it would be okay to advertise them, is my question.
Thank you, yes, that's correct. Yeah.
My other concern, which I did mention at the EMIS meeting, was gambling. We haven't talked about gambling, and it's a significant and serious problem. And whilst unhealthy foods and alcohol can certainly have impacts on health and home life, gambling can actually devastate finances. People can lose homes. They can become homeless, but we've not talked about gambling, which is fairly serious, and it's very topical. So I wondered why we hadn't included that.
Thank you for your question, Madam Mayor. We had limited the scope of the report to the notice of motion that was put forward, which was about alcohol and unhealthy food advertising, but certainly council's prerogative if they wish to also include gambling. That could be moved as an alternate motion.
Would it be an alternate motion or an amendment?
Sorry, I might have to ask governance to answer that one.
Ms Newman, governance?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, we would probably need to have a look at what the changes proposed, but I would suggest it would be an alternative motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I go back to the story why gaming was left out. When I put the motion up, I was just looking at the alcohol and unhealthy fast food. But I did notice that there were gaming, which lottery was advertising. So I was going to include gaming as well, but it was a bit late. So I think you're right. There are gaming advertisement with the lottery, and then 40 million on Thursday. So we do get that in the roller screen.
I was thinking not so much of Lottery West, who contributes to the community from the proceeds of the purchase of tickets. I was thinking more about the not wanting to advertise for very large gambling agencies. I was thinking more about the large gambling agencies as opposed to Lottery West, if I could say that. Okay, if there's no further questions on this particular item, let's move on to the next one. CD 2542, netball and multi-use indoor and outdoor courts needs assessment. Ms Pickering, Director of Community Development, you have 5 minutes to give your presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So this particular item was also, I believe, a notice of motion. We came, you councillors may remember, we came to the October 2024 ordinary meeting of council with a draft netball and multi-use indoor and outdoor courts needs assessment, and recommended that we engage further with the local netball clubs. And so we have undertaken that engagement, and we are now reporting back with the final draft netball and multi-use indoor and outdoor courts needs assessment. So just to summarise that we've engaged with all 9 City of Melville netball clubs now, and they have all provided feedback on the draft, which is been provided with the report. And there was some mainly minor amendments to the draft that we had provided back in October last year, and they've been summarised in the attachment to the item. The clubs are aware of the amended recommendations and are supportive of the proposed changes. And following the adoption of the needs assessment, if council adopts the assessment, the recommendations will be integrated into our upcoming review of the Active Reserve Infrastructure Strategy, or ARIS, and they'll be prioritised amongst all the other sport and recreation infrastructure needs. If I could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the estimated capital costs associated to the recommendations total 3.2 million. That's in today's costs. And to date, we have election commitments for the recommendations totalling 1.26 million, leaving an estimated 1.94 million in balance. There is opportunity for future funding applications, and we would certainly be making those. And also within the long-term financial plan, there's a provision of $350,000 per annum, which we can use to contribute to court resurfacing and sports floodlighting, which of course are some of the recommendations out of the assessment. So the total annual operating cost of proposed infrastructure from the needs assessment is estimated to be about $152,812 per annum, and that includes $85,912 worth of depreciation. We do get a little bit of income coming in through our managed outdoor courts, and that's worth approximately $12,710, but no further additional income. We don't expect any further additional income to be generated following the implementation of the recommended infrastructure, because it's particularly targeted to our netball clubs. Thank you. Then the last slide, again, has the officer recommendations, which of course is to endorse the needs assessment, and note that that prioritisation will occur through the 2025 review of the ARIS. Thank you.
You've finished your presentation. Thank you very much. Are there any questions to Ms Pickering? Councillor Edinger.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, Ms Pickering. I'm just on the second last slide. If we can go back to the second last slide, is that possible? The total annual operating cost includes depreciation, which isn't usually something that's included when you're presenting figures. So the actual operating cost is 66,900. Can you confirm that?
Through you, Madam Mayor. I have to get my calculator out.
Ms Bowman, CEO, will just make a comment. Oh, you found it?
I found it.
You found it. Thank you
very much. I'm sorry, it took me a while. Yes, $66,900 is the figure that I've calculated for the operating minus the depreciation. Thank you.
Thank you. And so if you add in the income of 12,710, the net cost to the city is 54,190. So if we're generous, we say it costs on average for us to manage these things $55,000 a year, which I think we get a really good return on investment because so many people play netball. So thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Edinger. Yes, that's
thank
correct.
you. Ms Pickering?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Edinger. Yes, that's a good point.
All right. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. I've asked you before, not you, but your offsider who presented EMIS last year. I was trying to get the figures for areas which the take-up of netball is increasing, and some areas the numbers are dwindling. So how do you allocate the funds? You know, like some places you may need more resources, and some places are actually dying. You know, so how do you allocate so much resources around the place?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Lee. So that was all part of the engagement with the clubs that we had. So we spoke to them about their viability and what they felt their goals were in the future. We certainly got feedback from some clubs that you know they were really struggling to field a team each year, and we feel as though we've adjusted the recommendations based on the feedback that we were providing, and diverted the you know, the improvements into the areas where we know that there is a lot of demand, and netball is very popular, and they've got very healthy, sustainable clubs.
All right. Are there any further questions? If there's no further questions, we'll move on to item E2564, Morrimuse Town Square Public Open Space Concept Designs. Mr McCarthy, Director Environment and Infrastructure, is available to take questions. Are there any questions? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is whether we are actually looking at doing a town square here or just another park, because it appears to me that what's been proposed is just another park. It's got an outdoor dunny stuck right in the middle of it, basketball hoops, things like that. It doesn't appear to me to be something that we could stand up and say is a town square.
Mr McCarthy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for your question, Councillor Ross. So the designs that have been prepared have been based on the feedback that we received from the community as part of our engagement process, but also they are aligned with the council resolution in regards to the development of public open space at Morrow Mews. So what we've prepared is a number of designs for consideration of the council, and are recommending 2 designs to go out to the community for further consultation based on the information that we've been able to gather both from the community feedback and research into other town square developments in other places. We feel that the concepts have been developed with that in mind, and so if there are other aspects that council feels or considers there should be inclusion in the concepts, then that a decision could be made around that as part of consideration of this item.
Thank you. Councillor Edinger?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank Mr McCarthy for his observation that the designs take into regard the intent of the motion. But my query is, the motion actually says, with regard to the city-owned land at 50 to 52 Kishorn Road and 23, 29 and 31 Morrow Mews, Applecross, resolves to forthwith progress conversion of 100% of the site to public open space to include extensive tree planting, a children's playground and seating. So can Mr McCarthy tell me how providing multiple parking spaces in the park actually aligns with that intent of 100% public open space, including tree planting, a children's playground and seating? Thank you.
Mr McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your question, Councillor Edinger. So in other public open spaces across the city, we do have parking. Most of our parks have parking within them. So our interpretation of that is that parking is a component of open space and needs to be provided. And there is an existing car park within those areas. So it was also done on the basis of not creating less parking spaces than what currently is around that area, because that's been other feedback that we got from community consultation, and it was felt that that was probably needed to assist with the users of this area. And those other components that you referred to have been included into the design as well.
Councillor Lee.
Can I just have a follow-up? Sorry, Councillor Lee.
Okay, yes, carry on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really appreciate that. Given the paucity of public open space, not including the river, which is not capable of hosting big groups to actually recreate properly, sorry about the noise outside my house, I just reiterate, why are we putting parking spaces in this park? Some parks, yes, they do have car spaces in, I agree, but there are many, many parks throughout the city that have no parking spaces in them. And it would be more useful, I believe, to the wider community if the 2 sides that are bordered by other lots...
Councillor, is that a question or are you debating?
My questions are available for developers to use as transition zones for this park, and the city doesn't seem to have taken that into consideration. Did the city take it into consideration at all? Thank you.
Mr McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for your additional question, Councillor Edinger. Yes, the city did take it into consideration, and we also responded to feedback from the community regarding the use of this in public open space and the need to have parking in close proximity. So both of those factors were included in our consideration. If there is another concept that councillors feel we should be presenting as part of our further engagement, then it's part of the consideration of this item. Amendments could be put forward in that regard.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One more question for you, Mr. McCarthy. Thanks very much. I spoke to the neighborhood, and your guys did go around with the iPad taking questions. So with the three concepts that we have developed, are they privy to those three concept plans, or we should hold our horses? Can we show them the three concept plans yet? They were asking for it. Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy.
So thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for your question, Councillor Lee. So these concepts are included in the agenda that is available to the public to look at now. So that is already publicly available information. And the idea following presentation to this council is to get approval to go out for further consultation with two of those concepts. So all of this information will be available to the public when they provide feedback on it, and the city has prepared a community engagement plan that has also been adopted by council, which we're following in regards to the method of consultation to ensure we get adequate feedback for consideration in developing up the designs further.
Thank you. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess so. So these are set in stone, Mr. McCarthy. Once we vote on this next week, there'll be no opportunity to change. Is that correct?
Mr. McCarthy.
Through you, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Barber. So this is the first stage of, we've got early concept designs. So the process is from here to gain feedback on the different designs that are out there, combine that information that we receive in the feedback into a final concept design, if you like, or a more detailed design, and then go back to the council with that design saying, based on the feedback on the concepts, here's what we've drafted, taking that into account, and then seeking council support to go forward with that design in terms of procurement and budget to implement.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May I just have a follow-up?
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy, so we're voting to just put concept 1 and 2 out in the public, or 1, 2 and 3?
So, through you, Madam Mayor, thanks for your question, Councillor Barber. So, where the officers are recommending 1 and 2 to go out to the community, concept option 3 is quite an aspirational future state type of plan that was really, I guess, trying to stretch where this town square could become in the future, subject to surrounding land holdings that are redeveloped, us being able to integrate with those as they are developed. So it's not, concept 3 is not something the city would do on its own. It would have to be something that required significant private sector investment to enable it to be done. And we've kept flexibility within concept designs 1 and 2 that, if needed, that sort of future development could be provided for without compromising the current designs that we're looking at.
Okay, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, Councillor Barber did have a proposition previously to have parking at the Tivoli Theatre site or adjoining that, and that doesn't seem to have been considered or followed up. But did the council actually, or did the officers actually look at the sorts of problems that would happen with having parking there and trying to hold a function which would attract, hopefully, thousands of people to attend, how that would, together that would work? Because it seems to me that we're trying to create something here that has future use in terms of diversity, in terms of including other people to come there and hold their functions. There are many things like
Is this a question, councillor, or are you putting forward your debate?
There is a question. The question was, have they considered the parking problems? And I suppose I'm adding some information as to why the parking problems would be worsened if, for instance, you were having
I think we understand.
Yeah,
I
okay,
think we just
thank
get the question answered. Mr McCarthy.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Ross. Again, I'll reiterate that the feedback that we got from the community, there was quite a lot of reference to parking and the need to have parking accessible to enable the area to be used in an optimum sort of way, particularly younger families with kids that could easily access the area and be able to take advantage of the facilities at that area. The Tivoli site, that is a different location. We didn't look at any consideration of, okay, well, if Tivoli is eventually developed into parking or further parking, how does that contribute to this site? We're looking at this site in regards to what the feedback from the community was and what currently exists there in terms of providing parking that people are able to access.
It strikes me that Tivoli is a reasonable distance away from this particular park. Would I be right? Mr McCarthy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just, I suppose, straight walking, either up Canning Highway or Kintail, it's probably, I don't know, 400 metres. So about a 5-minute walk, but slower if you've got a pram or a wheelchair or something like that.
Thank you. We have Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm just curious to see how do we go about securing funding for something iconic for the area? Because I can't really see where there's a space allocated for it. Personally, I like the blue cat. That's pretty nice. So is it possible to fund it through the Canning Bridge grant or the provision of art in LPP 1.4? Thank you.
Mr McCarthy?
So thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for your question, Councillor Lim. Probably not in a position to ask in regards to the public art funding model, but that is available to contribute to projects such as this. At the moment, the design as it's sitting doesn't include an iconic element apart from the water feature in one of the concepts there. But in terms of making a real splash, I guess that would have to be something that would be considered as part of the further development of the designs, and we can get some information to look at the sort of order of costs associated with including those iconic sort of features as part of the next design phase.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I must admit, I was a bit disappointed. I loved Concept 3 from the aerial view because I did imagine, a whole public open space being open space. I hear what you're saying, that the community want parking, because I understand that too. They're desperate for parking. I like Concept 3, however, did we consider underground parking? I know there's a lot of homes in Applecross and they actually have parking under the house because the land is so valuable and so beautiful. This is a fantastic piece of land. Did we not consider putting underground parking?
Mr McCarthy.
Thanks for your question, Councillor Barber. So that is an option, but it's quite expensive. So providing parking underneath a building is quite expensive. I think it's around about hundreds of thousands of dollars to provide more than at grade. So you'd have to basically build a basement and put cars in there. And again, we're looking at, looking at trying to balance having elements in the park as well as having something that's cost effective for us to be able to implement. But if it's something that the council feels strongly about, we could investigate it as part of the next phase of design and have that information available as we progress the designs further.
Thanks, Mr McCarthy. You'd have to look at the if it is popular, we could get money from parking fees, I guess. You look at the cost-benefit analysis of reaping that hundreds of thousands. I mean, we paid 66,000 to remove some swings, so maybe in putting it in that context, am I misreading something? Anyway, my other question is, so you said concept 3 was aspirational, and I'd love us to include something underground in the aspirational aspect. But it's a bit like Councillor Lim's question. Have we got a goal date to achieve the potential funds to meet concept 3? Is it worth putting a date out there and saying, look, we're aiming for this amount of money by this date so that we can progress to something perhaps a little better?
Mr McCarthy?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Barber. So, yeah, the aspiration, I don't think you can put a date on it. It's largely dependent on the rate of redevelopment of adjacent properties to be able to provide that integration with the park and the adjacent development. So it is largely dependent on that. Again, it's quite significant additional costs that it was felt that may raise expectations out to the community that this multi-layered public open space area is going to come off first cab off the rank. So I think what we're looking at is putting something there that will meet the requirements of a town square development whilst keeping options open into the future to be able to build upon that and enhance it based on how it's performing and its use and how people are visiting the area.
I'll just bring you to your attention to the financial implications. Concept 1, estimated construction 4 to 5 million. Concept 2, estimated construction cost 5 to 6 million. And concept 3, aspirational, estimated construction somewhere between 10 and 30 million. So I think that probably would slow us down a bit if we were aiming very high. But
I think it's good to aim high, Madam Mayor, and if we set a goal, then we could get the developer contributions. And I just thought it'd be nice to have a goal, an aspiration, as Director McCarthy said.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions? Councillor Spanbrook. Oh, it's okay. She's decided not to ask it.
Thank you.
Oh, you
Madam
did?
Mayor.
Okay.
I did have a question, only because it was going on a little bit too long. But just quickly, that with the one of the concepts, it's not really important which one, that I thought it would be important to have something like some form of stage or something, so where they could, could encourage performers. That would certainly, attract the people, but also, for like an art show or something, people can display things. I don't really see an area that would be suitable for that.
Mr McCarthy.
So thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for your question, Councillor Spanbrook. So one of the concept designs, I think concept 2, incorporates a space for community events. So it's an area where you could have performances, or it's a place where you could have food trucks or other things, or some other events that the community could gather around. So that's been specifically incorporated in concept 2. So we have considered that, and other aspects could be added to that over time if it was felt necessary.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Continuing from Councillor Barber, let's say we take concept 3 and we worry about funding. Can we open it up to the public and say, we can put your name there, name the park after you, and you contribute? So would that be, you've got to think aloud, different ways of raising money? Because a lot of people would be quite happy to name something, that would leave
Councillor
legacy.
Lee, I think you're just putting forward a concept rather than a question. Yes, you can discuss that with officers and have that conversation at another time. I'm just looking for questions to officers rather than the big ideas, which can be discussed in other forums. Okay, so are there any further questions? All right, if there's no further questions, we'll move on to the next item, which is E2562, response to petition Brentwood Village Shopping Centre car park. Are there any questions for Mr McCarthy? Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just a question around this. Can the City of Melville utilise the Street Alive program that was announced by the state government, I think it was last September? And then, they could potentially work with the Brentwood town team to secure, more money to contribute in the area. Thank you.
Mr McCarthy.
So thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for your question, Councillor Lim. Yes, we did actually have a presentation on the Streets of Live by Town Team and Main Roads recently, so we are aware of that program and how it might be used. I think the issues raised in this petition are specific to ones around safety and access, and we, as part of our investigations into the petition, have identified that there are a number of areas we need to investigate further and look at having better options to improve safety and accessibility to that area. But as part of that, we could engage with the town teams during that process and have a discussion with them about opportunities through the Streets Alive program.
Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry for the follow-up question. Just wondering if the design will also incorporate some, bike or non-vehicle sort of friendly infrastructure in the plan. Thank you.
Mr McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Lim. So those things could be considered as part of our look into the parking. One of the things that we have identified at some of the car parking spaces are not compliant, and also some of the facility access parking is not compliant. So we will be losing some car park due to the redesign to ensure they meet the required standard. So we'd need to have discussions with the shop owners and other users in the area to look at finding the right balance between parking capacity and accommodating other needs. But part of what we're looking at in terms of improved safety is to make it safe for pedestrians to be able to move around both the car park area and the footpath area near the access points and around the car park generally.
Thank you.
I just had a query about a comment that was made in the report. It was saying that the Mullion Road entry, is it the Cranford Avenue entry that was of concern? Yes, Cranford Entry Avenue was a contributor to low-speed crashes and near misses because of the quick entry into the car park. No, I've answered my own question, thank you. That's a very complex area to deal with. Are you thinking or considering having one-way entry, one-way exit approach at all, or are you considering just keeping it two-way all around?
Thank you for the question, Madam Mayor. So that's part of the investigation, is to look at that access point and whether where it's located is the most suitable location, and also access from the other main access road on both Cranford and Moyleen, in terms of looking at trying to make that as accessible and safe as we can, either within the current designs there or any modifications thereof that could be accommodated.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? If there's no further questions, Councillor Lee.
Thank you. I spoke to the neighbours, and they were saying that the staff pick up that the back street should be considered as well. So is that some way we can incorporate? No mention where the trucks drop off the goods. So if you incorporate that back street, that would actually solve the problem, because not many people know that you can go out from the back street. Thank you.
Councillor Lee, is that a question or just a comment? Okay, thank you. No, that's all right. I think we've got the idea. All right, if there's no further questions on this particular item, we'll move on to motions with previous notice. Now we have a notice of motion, item 15.1, superannuation for elected members, raised by Councillor Edinger. Are there any questions for Councillor Edinger? Okay, if there are no questions to Councillor Edinger.
Apologies, Madam Mayor, you may not have seen me put my hand up there.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. I'm just wondering about the portion of the motion that talks to backdating. That may be in context jumping the gun, given that we're asking both for a report and then saying, well, if we make a decision, we'll backdate. So I just that reads to me as though the report will be a fait accompli, or at least that we're leaning fairly heavily on the outcome of the report. And I wonder if the goal of this motion is to get a view as to whether this should be done and what the cost should be. It might be better off without that last portion.
Councillor Councillor Edinger, do you have a response?
I think I was just making it clear that I think that it clearly says if a decision is made, so a decision to commence, so the decision may be we won't have superannuation, but I wanted to make it clear that we would have the best outcome from a superannuation point for elected members, and that would be to start from the 1st of February, which was when it became possible for us to receive superannuation benefits. I'm not a legal expert, so I don't know if we need to get a legal opinion on this.
Ms Bowman, CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Edinger. So we can look into whether it would be possible to backdate. So my understanding would require a council resolution as to the date the superannuation would commence from. So does Mr Tuffin want to clarify that at all? Yep.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Through the chair, that's correct. With the changes to legislation, it is possible through a decision of absolute majority of council to back pay from the 1st of February. However, if a decision isn't made, it will become mandatory from the 19th of October this year for bands 1 and 2. And there is if this places an elected member in a situation where they do not wish to receive the super contribution, they can not elect to receive the payment. Sorry, just for clarification, that would be in relation to if that was to impact any sort of financial arrangements they had in place outside of these payments.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Green.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Perhaps for the CEO and maybe on to Director Tuffin. Are you aware of any cases, perhaps recent cases, where a backdating of superannuation has been agreed upon, perhaps within another local government, or something to refer to from a feedback point of view?
Ms Bowman.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Green. I believe the WA Local Government Association are also providing some guidance on this matter. So we can check with them as to any other councils who have recently had a decision regarding this matter. So we're happy to look into that and provide some information if we can.
I understand a number of local governments have already done that.
Okay.
Moving on to Councillor Spanbrook.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted a correction, if I may, from Director Tuffin. I may not have heard it correctly. I think he said that if a councillor did not wish to receive superannuation, that they cannot refuse it. Was that correct? If resolution was that we were to receive it. Thanks.
Mr. Tuffin.
Through the chair. No, sorry, I'll clarify that for you, Councillor Spanbrook. That was if, for example, a councillor had a financial pension and taking this superannuation payment was going to, or push you over the superannuation threshold, then a councillor could elect not to receive it. So you do not have to if council makes a decision, but it's open to council to receive it if they wish.
Understand. Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to clarify, are you talking about superannuation, which is the 11.5% on the allowance? Because superannuation can only be paid from when you're receiving wages. As I understand, the Vic Park Council is applying for the councillors to be paid a full wage. Like the Eastern States councillors, they've all been paid full wages for a long time. So are you talking about the same thing or separate? Because superannuation can only be paid on your income, not on allowance. Thank you.
Mr. Tuffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The changes to the legislation actually allow a payment to be made based on the sitting fees and allowances of council. So whilst councillors are not considered employees of the local government, they are now entitled to the 11.5% super guarantee.
Councillor Green, can you turn off your microphone, please? Are there any further questions? Okay, if there's no further questions, we're moving on to item 15.2, Notice of Motion, Review of Tree Policy. The motion is raised by Councillor Green, and are there any questions for Councillor Green or the Director of Environment and Infrastructure? If there are no questions, we'll move on to the next item. 16 motions without previous notice. There are no motions without previous notice for this evening. 17 matters for which the meeting was closed. It has not been closed. Do we need to close the meeting for any purpose? No, we don't. So we're going on to item CD 2541. No. Oh, hang on. We didn't. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to closure since we've already dealt with that matter. Prior to closing the meeting, I would like to remind the Council of the following late items which are expected to be included in the agenda this Friday, 14th of March. That is C25-251, Compliance Audit Return 2024, form the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee, held on 10th of March. C25-252, Appointment of External Member for the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee. UP 2560, Review of Local Planning Policy 121, Short-Term Accommodation. I would also like to note that there may be an item in relation to the Regional Resource Recovery Centre Transition Heads of Agreement. If this item goes ahead, it will be included in Friday's agenda. So elected members are also reminded that there is a short briefing following the closure of this meeting. So the purposes of the minutes, can the following councillors please confirm they're still in attendance? Councillor Edinger.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councillor Fitzgerald.
Present, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Spanbrook.
Present as well, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Spanbrook. There being no further business, I declare the meeting closed at 8:34. Thank you very much for your attendance.